There is a mathematical certainty in naval warfare that every sailor knows but few speak aloud. It is the calculus of the abyss. In the vast, crushing silence of the Pacific Ocean, the advantage almost always belongs to the thing that cannot be seen. For decades, the rule was absolute. To hunt a submarine is to enter a dark room with a flashlight that only works intermittently, searching for a man with a knife who is waiting for you to make a mistake. The conventional wisdom of 1944 dictated that a destroyer escort might spend an entire war patrolling the shipping lanes and never see a verified kill. A successful captain might confirm one, sinking in a career. 2 would make him a legend. 3 was statistically impossible. The ocean is simply too big, the sonar of the era too primitive, and the enemy too cunning. The Japanese Imperial Navy possessed some of the finest, most advanced submarines in the world, piloted by men who had trained for a decisive battle of attrition since the 1920s. They were the apex predators of the deep. The rule said you do not find them easily. The rule said that when you do find them, they will likely slip away into the thermal layers, disappearing like ghosts. The rule said that no single ship could ever dominate the underwater battle space so completely that it would force an entire enemy command to rethink its doctrine. But in May of 1944, in a stretch of water that would soon become a graveyard, one small, underpowered ship broke the rule. They did not just break it. They shattered it into pieces so small that history still has trouble comprehending the magnitude of what happened. This is not a story about luck. It is not a story about the fog of war clearing by chance. This is the story of 12 days, where the math stopped working, and a single American crew did the impossible. To understand the sheer absurdity of what was about to happen, you first have to look at the ship itself. The USS England, designated DE-635, was not a titan of the seas. She was not a mighty battleship like the Missouri or a fleet carrier like the Enterprise. She was a destroyer, escort, a Buckley-class vessel. In the hierarchy of the United States Navy, destroyer escorts were the working dogs. They were smaller than full-size destroyers, slower and lighter armed. They were built rapidly, welded together in mass production to flood the Atlantic and Pacific with hulls. They were designed to protect convoys, to screen the fleet, to take the hits so the big ships didn't have to. When you look at her specifications, there is nothing that screams Predator. She displaced about 1,400 tons. Her top speed was roughly 24 knots, which meant that a surfaced Japanese submarine on a good day could almost keep pace with her. She was manned by a crew that was largely comprised of reservists, men who had been civilians not long before. They were clerks, farmers, and factory workers, commanded by officers who were often learning the art of war on the fly. But the USS England had two things that the Japanese Imperial Navy did not account for. The first was her skipper, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton. He was a man who understood that in the game of anti-submarine warfare, aggression was not just a mindset, it was a technical requirement. Pendleton was not interested in scaring submarines away. He was not interested in suppression. He was interested in extermination. He drilled his crew relentlessly. In the sweltering heat of the South Pacific, when other crews were resting, the men of the USS England were running drills. They were practicing the geometry of the kill. Pendleton knew that the difference between a submarine slipping away and a submarine being crushed by water pressure was a matter of seconds and degrees. He turned the bridge of the England into a finely tuned instrument of calculation. The second thing the England possessed was a weapon that was about to change the nature of the hunt forever. For the first few years of the war, the primary weapon against a submerged submarine was the depth charge. The concept was simple and brutal. You rolled a large canister of explosives off the back of the ship, or fired it from a projector called a K-gun. The charge would sink to a preset depth and explode. The problem with depth charges was the noise. When 300 pounds of Torpex explodes underwater, it creates a chaotic, deafening roar. It churns the water, creating millions of bubbles. For a sonar operator, this is blinding. After a depth charge attack, the sonar goes dead. The screen is filled with static. You are deaf and blind for minutes, giving the enemy submarine precious time to change course, dive deeper, or slip away. A depth charge attack was a gamble. You dropped the hammer, and then you waited in silence to see if oil or debris floated to the surface. Ifumi said you had to reacquire the target through the turbulent water, which was often impossible. But the USS England was fitted with something different. Located on the bow, forward of the bridge, was a strange-looking apparatus known as the Hedgehog. It looked like a crate of oversized mortars. The Hedgehog was a spigot mortar system that fired 24 projectiles in a circular pattern ahead of the ship. Unlike depth charges, which exploded at a set depth regardless of whether they hit anything, the Hedgehog projectile was a contact fuse. It would only explode if it physically hit the hull of the submarine. This changed everything. It meant that if you fired a salvo of Hedgehogs and missed, there was no explosion. The water remained calm. The sonar remained clear. You could maintain contact with the target and fire again immediately. It allowed the hunter to stay on the trail without blinding himself. However, it also required a terrifying level of precision. To get a hit with a Hedgehog, you had to drive your ship directly over the top of the submarine. You had to anticipate its movements perfectly. You had to place a 24 projectile pattern directly onto a moving target hidden hundreds of feet below the black water. It required a level of coordination between the sonar shack and the bridge that most crews never achieved. It was a weapon for a surgeon, not a butcher. And Walton Pendleton had spent months sharpening his scalpel. The stage for this impossible performance was set in mid-May, 1944. The Pacific War was shifting gears. The United States was preparing for the invasion of the Marianas Islands, a massive leap across the Central Pacific that would bring American B-29 bombers within range of Tokyo. The Japanese High Command knew something was coming. They needed intelligence. They needed to know where the American carriers were gathering. To find out, they established a scout line. They took their best operational submarines and strung them out in a picket line northeast of the Admiralty Islands. This was the NA line. It was a tripwire. The idea was that the American fleet, moving northwest, would have to cross this line. The submarines would spot them, report their position, and then attack. It was a solid plan. The Japanese submarine force was technically advanced. Their optics were superior. Their torpedoes, the famous long-lance oxygen torpedoes, were the best in the world, with range and lethality that shocked Allied planners. The men inside these iron tubes were veterans. They were disciplined, fanatical, and ready to die for the Emperor. They believed they were the hunters. They believed they were the invisible shield that would protect the homeland. But American intelligence was reading their mail. Codebreakers at FRUPAC, the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, had intercepted and decrypted the orders, establishing the NA line. They knew exactly where the Japanese submarines were going to be. Admiral Halsey, the commander of the Third Fleet, saw an opportunity. He didn't just want to avoid the trap, he wanted to dismantle it. He ordered a hunter-killer group to the area. This group consisted of 3 destroyer escorts, the USS George, the USS Raby, and the USS England. Their mission was simple. Go to the coordinates. Find the submarines. Kill them! On May 18, 1944, the 3 ships arrived in the target area. The sea was calm, the weather sweltering. Tension on the bridge of the USS England was palpable. Every man on board knew the stakes. They were hunting the hunters. They knew that at any moment, a torpedo wake could appear from nowhere, racing toward them at 45 knots. The psychological pressure of anti-submarine warfare is unique. In a surface battle, you can see the enemy muzzle flashes. You can see the shells coming. In Hanai se doble hunt, the enemy is a phantom. You are staring at the ocean surface, waiting for a periscope feather, while the sonar operator sits in a dark room, listening to the rhythmic ping of the transducer. Ping. Silence. Ping. Silence. It is a heartbeat of electronic sound that governs your life. The first contact came on the afternoon of May 19th. The USS England picked up a sound contact. It was faint, buried in the background noise of the ocean, but the operator, a man tuned to the specific frequency of death, knew it wasn't a whale or a thermal layer. It was metal. It was moving. It was I-16. I-16 was not just any submarine. She was a veteran boat, a Type C-1 cargo submarine that had been used to supply isolated island garrisons. She was large, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yoshitaka Takayuchi. Takayuchi was no amateur. As soon as he realized he was being pinged, he began evasive maneuvers. Down in the sonar room of the England, the operators watched the range close. This is the moment where training takes over. On to Bridge Pendleton is he is receiving a stream of data, bearing, range, estimated speed. He has to visualize the submarine in 3 dimensions. He has to predict where Takayuchi will be in the time it takes the ship to cover the distance. Pendleton orders the ship to general quarters. The alarm clangs throughout the vessel, sending men scrambling to their stations. The engine room brings the turbines up to speed. The ship heels over as it turns, bringing its bow around to the bearing 1,000 yards. 800 yards. The tension is excruciating. You have to understand that as the ship approaches the submarine, there comes a moment of blindness. As the destroyer gets closer, the sonar angle becomes too steep, and the contact is lost. This is called the dead time. It lasts 4 seconds, but it feels like hours. During this time, the captain is flying blind, trusting his last calculation. He has to fire his weapon based on where he thinks the enemy will be. 500 yards. Pendleton holds his nerve. He waits for the perfect firing solution. At the critical moment, he gives the order. Fire! On the bow, the Hedgehog mortar erupt in a ripple fire sequence. 24 heavy projectiles arc into the air, splashing into the water in a large, elliptical circle 200 yards ahead of the ship. Now, silence. The crew of the England stands on the deck, gripping the railing, staring at the patch of ocean where the mortar went in. They are waiting for a sound. If T.I. May said, they will hear nothing. If they hit, the contact fuse will detonate the warhead, and the sound will crack through the hull like a hammer blow. Seconds tick by. The projectiles are sinking, falling through the water column, searching for the steel skin of I-16. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then a dull, heavy thud shakes the England, then another, and another. 4 distinct explosions. The men on deck cheer, but Pendleton keeps his eyes on the water. The sea begins to boil. A massive bubble of air and oil erupts to the surface, bringing with it debris, shattered wood, and the unmistakable smell of diesel fuel. 1-16 is gone, crushed by the pressure, her hull ripped open by the Hedgehog warheads. It was a textbook kill, a perfect execution of the doctrine Pendleton had drilled into his men. For most ships, this would be the highlight of the deployment. They would paint a Japanese flag on the bridge wing, file a report, and maybe get a commendation. But for the USS England, this was just the opening act. This was just the warm-up. The crew felt a surge of validation. The weapon worked. The tactics worked. The captain knew what he was doing, but they had no idea that they had just started a clock. They had just initiated a sequence of events that would defy every probability model in the Naval Handbook. The hunter-killer group continued its patrol. They were working their way down the line of Japanese submarines. The Japanese commandos, sitting in their silent boats, had no idea that I-16 was dead. They maintained their positions, waiting for the American fleet. They were sitting ducks, but they were dangerous ducks. 3 days later, on May 22nd, the radar operators on the USS George picked up a contact. It was night. The darkness was absolute. The contact was brief, a blip on the green screen that vanished as quickly as it appeared. A submarine had surfaced to recharge its batteries, and then dived. The George moved in to investigate, but couldn't hold the contact. The water conditions were poor, the thermal layers reflecting the sonar beams, creating false echoes. The George and the Robbie spent hours searching, frustration mounting. They knew something was down there, but they couldn't pin it. Enter the England. Pendleton brought his ship into the search area. He approached the problem differently. He looked at the track, the last known position, and he tried to think like the Japanese commander. Where would he go? How would he try to escape? The submarine was RO-106. Pendleton began a creeping search. The sonar operators on the England were fresh, their confidence high from the kill of I-16. At 3:50 in the morning, under the cover of darkness, They got a ping. Clear, distinct, metal. Pendleton wasted no time. He maneuvered the England with aggressive precision. He didn't wait for the other ships to form a cordon. He went straight for the throat. The RO-106 was deep, trying to hide under a thermal layer, but the England's sonar punched through. The range closed. Again, the tension of the dead time. Again, the order to fire. Again, the ripple of 24 mortar arching into the night. This time, the wait was agonizingly long. The projectiles had to sink deeper. The ocean remained silent. Had they missed? Had the submarine turned at the last second? Suddenly, a violent underwater explosion rocked the ship. It wasn't the sharp crack of a hedgehog hit. It was something bigger, a massive, rolling boom that shuddered through the steel frames of the destroyer escort. The hedgehog had triggered a secondary explosion. The submarine's magazines or torpedoes had detonated. The RO-106 was obliterated. Debris shot out of the water. The kill was confirmed. 2 submarines in 3 days. The crew of the England was ecstatic. 2 kills was a career for most ships. To get 2 in a single patrol was rare. To get 2 in 3 days was exceptional. The mood on the ship began to change. It shifted from anxiety to a cold, professional focus. They realized they were good at this. They realized that the Japanese submarines, for all their reputation, were vulnerable to this specific combination of ship, crew, and weapon. But the ocean is a big place, and luck is a finite resource. Surely, the streak would end there. Surely, the remaining Japanese submarines would be alerted. Surely, they would change their tactics. But the Japanese command structure was rigid. The submarines on the NA line had their orders. They were to hold their stations. They were to wait for the American fleet. They were not allowed to break radio silence to warn each other unless it was an emergency. And they often hesitated. This rigidity was about to cost them everything. May 23, the very next day. The group is moving south. They are sweeping the ocean, their sensors reaching out into the deep. The crew of the England is tired. Anti-submarine warfare is exhausting. You don't sleep. You nap in 15-minute intervals. Your ears ring with the phantom sound of sonar pings. The heat is oppressive, but the adrenaline keeps them going. Contact. The Raby picks up a target. It's RO-104. The Raby attacks. Misses. The submarine dives deep. Maneuvering frantically, the George moves in. Attacks. Misses. The submarine is good. The Japanese captain is using the thermal layers. Changing depth, changing speed. He is making it difficult. The frustration on the Raby and the George is mounting. They are expending depth charges, churning up the water, making it harder to hear. Pendleton watches the chaos. He radios the division commander. Let me have a crack at him. He brings the England into the fray. The water is messy, disturbed by the previous attacks. But the England's sonar team is locked in. They filter out the noise. They find the thread of sound that doesn't belong. There, a faint echo amidst the turbulence. Pendleton plots the intercept. He anticipates the submarine's evasion. The Japanese captain thinks he has escaped the Raby and the George. He thinks he is safe in the blind spot. He doesn't know the England is sliding into position above him. Pendleton lines up the shot. He is calm, almost detached. He is solving a geometry problem. He adjusts for the submarine's speed. He adjusts for the sink rate of the hedgehogs. He orders the fire, the mortar launch, the splash, the weight. Boom, boom, boom. 3 hits. The ocean erupts again. RO-104 is destroyed. 3 submarines in 4 days. Now, the story begins to leave the realm of the believable. On the bridge of the England, the officers are looking at each other with a mixture of awe and disbelief. This isn't happening. This isn't how war works. You don't just line them up and knock them down. But the crew begins to feel invincible. They call themselves the headhunters. They paint the 3rd flag on the bridge wing. The paint is barely dry on the 2nd one. But the pace is relentless. There is no time to celebrate. The NA line is still there. There are more boats. May 24, the sun has barely set on the Pacific, but the darkness feels heavy, pressing against the portholes. The USS England is prowling. By now, the crew is operating in a state of trance. The exhaustion is physical, a deep ache in the bones caused by days of standing at general quarters, days of sleeping in life jackets, days of eating sandwiches with one hand while holding a railing with the other. But mentally, they are wired. They are electric. They know they are doing something that defies explanation. At 1:20 in the morning, the silence breaks again. The England turned for home. She was battered, her paint stripped by the salt and the sun, her crew looking like walking skeletons. But she carried with her a record that has never been equaled. When they arrived at Manus Island, the reception was muted at first. People simply didn't believe it. It wasn't until the intelligence officers analyzed the debris, the oil samples, and the audio recordings that the confirmation came down. It was true. The strategic impact of this 12-day rampage was immediate and devastating for the Japanese. The submarines that the England destroyed were the eyes of the combined fleet. Because they were gone, the Japanese Admiral Ozawa was blind. He did not know where the American carriers were. He could not position his forces effectively for the coming Battle of the Philippine Sea. When that massive battle finally erupted, the battle that would become known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Japanese were at a severe disadvantage. They blundered into the American fleet because their scout line was gone. The USS England hadn't just sunk 6 boats. She had helped set the stage for the destruction of Japanese naval aviation. But what of the men? What of Walton Pendleton? Walton Pendleton was a man who had done his job too well. In the immediate aftermath, there was a strange mix of celebration and skepticism. When the England docked, the story of her patrol seemed to belong to the realm of fiction. Admiral Ernest Keane, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, fleet a man known for being as hard as granite and twice as cold, reportedly declared, "There will always be an England in the United States Navy." It was a rare moment of levity from a man who treated war as a mathematical equation. The ship was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, a badge of honor that every member of the crew would wear for the rest of their lives. But accolades are one thing. The true measure of their victory was written in the silence of the radio waves across the Pacific. You have to understand the magnitude of the void the England created. The Japanese plan for the defense of the Marianas, Operation Ago, relied entirely on the concept of a decisive battle. They planned to lure the American fleet into a trap where land-based aircraft and carrier planes would combine to crush the U.S. Navy. But to spring a trap, you have to know when the prey has entered the kill zone. The Nalindo submarines, the England destroyed, was the trigger mechanism. With the trigger broken, the Japanese combined fleet was left swinging in the dark. When the Battle of the Philippine Sea finally commenced in June 1944, the Japanese response was uncoordinated and desperate. Because they lacked the early warning from their submarines, they were forced to launch their aircraft at extreme ranges, hoping to catch the Americans by surprise. Instead, they flew their pilots into a meat grinder. American Hellcat fighters, directed by radar and positioned perfectly, shot down over 300 Japanese planes in a single day. It was the end of Japanese naval air power. It was the Turkey Shoot, and while the pilots of the Hellcats pulled the triggers, it was the crew of the England weeks earlier and hundreds of miles away, who had set the table. They had blinded the samurai before he could draw his sword. But the war does not reward heroes with safety. It only rewards them with more war. The England continued to serve. She continued to escort convoys, to screen the fleet, to do the unglamorous work of the destroyer escort. The men on board carried the swagger of the headhunters, but they knew that the law of averages was waiting for them. You cannot defy the odds forever. In May 1945, almost exactly 1 year after her historic run, the England was off the coast of Okinawa. The nature of the war had changed again. The Japanese were no longer relying on submarines or fleet battles. They had turned to the divine wind. Kamikaze. On Mainweva 3, Japanese dive bombers dropped out of the clouds, aiming for the picket line. The England was on station. Her gunners, The same men who had cheered as the submarines were crushed now filled the sky with 20mm and 40mm fire. They shot one plane down. They damaged a second, but the third one, a Valdivommer, was piloted by a man who had already accepted his death. He didn't pull up. He didn't waver. He crashed his plane directly into the starboard side of the England just below the bridge. The explosion was catastrophic. The bomb the plane was carrying detonated inside the ship. Fire swept through the forward spaces. The bridge, the very brain of the ship, where Pendleton had orchestrated his symphony of destruction, was engulfed. 37 men died instantly. 25 were wounded. The ship was dead in the water, listing, burning, a smoking ruin. Biol writes, the USS England should have sunk that day. The damage was mortal, but the men who had hunted the hunters refused to be prey. They fought the fires with the same intensity they had fought the submarines. They flooded compartments to correct the list. They dragged their wounded shipmates out of the inferno. They saved her. The England did not go down. She was towed back to port, a broken, blackened hull, but still afloat. She would never fight again. The war ended before she could be repaired. In the cold accounting of the post-war drawdown, she was deemed too damaged to fix. She was sold for scrap. The steel that had withstood the pressure of the Pacific and the fire of the kamikaze was cut apart and melted down. But the record remains. To this day, no single ship in the history of naval warfare has ever matched the USS England achievement. 6 submarines in 12 days. It is a statistic that stands like a monolith. In the modern era, with nuclear submarines and satellite tracking, such a feat is technically impossible. The conditions, the technology, and the tactical intuition of 1944 will never be replicated. It is easy to look at this story as a triumph of technology of the Hedgehog mortar and the sonar. But that misses the point. The George and the Rabi had the same technology. They had the same sonar, the same weapons, the same training. The difference was the human element. The difference was a crew that reached a level of synchronization that bordered on telepathy. The difference was a commander, Walton Pendleton, who possessed the rare ability to visualize the unseen, to project his mind into the deep and anticipate the desperate maneuvers of a drowning enemy. We often think of World War II in terms of massive armies and cloud-darkening fleets. We think of D-Day, of Iwo Jima, but the war at sea was often a lonely, intimate affair. It was fought by small groups of men in tin cans, battling an enemy they couldn't see, in an environment that wanted to kill them both. The story of the USS England is a reminder that in the vast industrial machinery of global conflict, a handful of individuals can still grab the wheel of history and steer it in a new direction. Most of the men of the England are gone now. The silence of the ocean has reclaimed them, just as it reclaimed the crews of the 6 submarines they sent to the bottom. But their legacy is not silent. It echoes in the training manuals of every navy in the world. It lives in the tactical doctrines of anti-submarine warfare. And it lives in the memory of a 12-day period where the impossible became routine. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm that this piece of naval history is worth remembering, and it helps us keep these stories alive. We are dedicated to rescuing these forgotten chapters from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a briefing. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state, and tell us if someone in your family served in the Pacific Theater. We read every comment. Thank you for ensuring that Lieutenant Commander Pendleton and the brave men of the USS England do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered. The USS George, acting as the bird dog for the group, picks up a radar contact. It is brief, a ghost skipping across the waves at 14,000 yards. It is another submarine, surfaced to charge batteries, desperate for fresh air. This is RO-116. The moment the radar waves hit her hull, her captain orders a crash dive. She slips beneath the surface, hoping to disappear into the black water. But the George has the fix. The George races and her sonar operators are straining, trying to lock on to the diving target. But the ocean is uncooperative. The submarine is maneuvering wildly, creating knuckles in the water-swirling vortices of turbulence that reflect sonar pings and create false targets. The George fires hedgehogs. Misses. The George fires again. Misses. The frustration on the bridge of the George is palpable. They found the target, but they cannot kill it. Pendleton watches the drama unfold from the bridge of the England. He sees the tracers of the George's searchlight, the splashes of her attacks. He wades. He does not rush in blindly. He studies the pattern. When the George turns away to open up the distance for another run, Pendleton makes his move. He brings the England in on a sharp intercept course. He is not chasing the submarine's current position. He is hunting the future position. He anticipates the turn. He bets that the Japanese captain, spooked by the George, will try to double back. It is a gamble, but Pendleton is on a winning streak. The England slides into the firing slot. The sonar acquires the target. The solution is locked. Fire. The hedgehogs fly. The waiting game begins again. But this time the crew expects the sound. They are not hoping for a hit. They are waiting for it, and it comes. 3 distinct explosions rip through the depths. Debris floats to the surface. RO-116 is dead. 4 submarines. 5 days. The news of the 4th kill begins to filter up the chain of command. In Pearl Harbor, intelligence officers are staring at the reports with confusion. They suspect a clerical error. A single destroyer escorts sinking for enemy submarines in a single week is unheard of. It sounds like propaganda. It sounds like a lie. Admiral Halsey himself is notified. The fleet is stunned, but the England is not done. 2 days pass. The heat builds. The humidity inside the steel hull is suffocating. The men are running on caffeine and adrenaline. On May 26th, the group is moving south, deeper into the Japanese patrol line. They are dismantling the trap one link at a time. The next target is RO-108. This time, the submarine is spotted by the Rabbi. The Rabbi attacks, but the Japanese captain is skilled. Ego is deep, dropping below the thermal gradient, using the cold water layers to bounce the sonar pings away. The Rabbi loses contact. The George moves in, tries to reacquire, and fails. The submarine is slipping away. It is winning. Pendleton radios the division commander. He asks for permission to take the lead. The other captains, perhaps swallowing their pride, step aside. They have seen the England work. They know that Pendleton sees things they do not. The England moves into the search area. The sonar operators, men who by now are arguably the best in the entire Pacific theater, begin to peel back the layers of the ocean. They filter out the biologics, the shrimp, the whales. They find the metallic echo. Pendleton sets up the run. It is mechanical now. Approach. Calculate. Fire. The hedgehogs launch. The result is almost redundant. A massive underwater explosion. A geyser of oil and water. RO-108 is gone. 5 submarines. At this point, you have to pause and consider the implications. In the history of naval warfare, entire flotillas of destroyers have spent years hunting submarines without achieving what the England has done in a week. They have wiped out nearly the entire scouting line. The Japanese High Command is going blind. They are losing their eyes in the Pacific, and they don't know why. They don't know that it is one small ship doing all the damage. They assume a massive American task force is sweeping the area. They begin to pull their remaining forces back, fearing a trap. The England is not just sinking ships. She is altering the strategic landscape of the war. But there is still one more. And this one will not be like the others. If you find this story of the USS England's impossible streak as fascinating as we do, we would be honored if you would hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of tactical brilliance and naval history deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. The date is May 30th. The 100-killer group has been at sea for 12 days. They are low on fuel. They are low on ammunition. The crews are exhausted beyond words. They are ordered to head for Menace Island to refuel and The hunt is supposed to be over. They are heading home, but the ocean has one last test. At 2 o'clock hours, the sound of a ping cuts through the bridge of the USS George contact. It is RO-105. And commanding this boat is Captain Rakino Atsuj is a different breed of enemy. He is an ace. He is a veteran who knows the capabilities of American destroyers. And more importantly, he knows their weaknesses. He knows that the Hedgehog has a limited range. He knows that sonar has blind spots. He is not going to panic. He is going to fight. The George attacks immediately. Mrs. Ez, the submarine dives and maneuvers violently. The Raby moves in. Mrs. Edsuj is good. He is constantly changing his depth and heading. He is keeping his ship in the wake of the destroyers, using their own turbulence to hide his signature. He is playing a high-stakes game of tag in the dark. The battle rages 4 hours. The sun comes up. The heat returns. The George and the Ravi are relentless, dropping depth charges, firing hedgehogs, but they cannot land a killing blow. Atsuj is anticipating every move. He is making the Americans waste their ammunition. By mid-morning, the George and the Rabi are running empty. They have fired everything they have. They are frustrated, angry, and helpless. Pendleton and the England are hanging back. They have limited ammunition left. They have to make it count. The division commander orders the George and Raby to withdraw. They are useless now. It is all down to the England. One ship, one submarine, one chance. But, this time, the magic seems to be gone. The England moves in for an attack. Pendleton calculates the solution. Fire. Miss. The crew is shocked. They don't miss. They never miss. But Atsuj has turned sharply at the last second, dodging the pattern. Pendleton circles back. He resets the board. He tries a different approach angle. Fire! Miss Atsuj is mocking them. He is turning inside their turn radius. He is using the England's own momentum against her. The hours drag on. Tensions on the bridge are reaching a breaking point. The crew is staring at the water, willing the submarine to die, but it refuses. This is a duel between two masters. Pendleton on the surface, Atsuj in the deep. They are locked in a slow-motion dance of death. Night falls again. The hunt has been going on for 24 hours. This is unheard of. Usually, a hunt ends in an hour, either with a kill or an escape. This is a marathon. The air in the England is stale. The sonar operators are rubbing their eyes, their hands shaking. They have been listening to the ping for a full day. Pendleton realizes he has to change the game. He cannot just outcalculate Atsuj. He has to trick him. He realizes that Atsuj is reacting to the sound of the England's propellers. When the England speeds up for an attack run, Atsuj hears the change in pitch and turns. Pendleton decides to do something counterintuitive. He orders the ship to slow down. He creeps in. He minimizes the acoustic signature. He wants to lull Atsuj into a false sense of security. He wants the Japanese captain to think the Americans have given up or lost the trail. At the same time, the division commander radius Pendleton. We are low on fuel. We have to leave. You have one more run. Make it count. One more run. The magazines are almost empty. The fuel gauges are in the red. This is Italiano. If they miss this, RO-105 survives. Atsuj wins. He goes home and tells the Japanese command about the tactics of the enemy. The secret of the England's success will be out. Pendleton looks at his sonar officer. Give me a solid bearing. Bearing, steady. Captain, range 600 yards. Pendleton does not speed up. He drifts. He waits until the very last possible second. He waits until the ship is almost on top of the submarine. He wants to give Atsuj 0 reaction time. Fire. The last salvo of Hedgehog's arcs into the night sky. The crew holds its breath. This silence is different. It is heavy with the weight of the last 12 days. It is the silence of a final judgment. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, nothing. 4 seconds, and then the ocean splits open. A titanic explosion, larger than any of the others, lifts the stern of the England out of the water. The shockwave knocks men off their feet. The RO-105 didn't just get hit, it was annihilated. The secondary explosions ripple through the water for minutes, a series of underwater thunderclaps that signal the end of Rakino Sukatsuji and his crew. 6 submarines. 12 days, the impossible had been achieved.